Hi, I'm Maggie. Thank you for stopping by Crafts the Charm today. You are most welcome here. Today I want to do another pumpkin topiary from Dollar Tree products, but this time I want to do something sort of dramatic. Let's go have some fun.
All right, so we're going to begin with one of these foam carvable pumpkins from the Dollar Tree. And the one I have here is orange. I am going to paint it black, so you may prefer to simply use one of the black ones from the Dollar Tree, but I think you are going to want to paint it anyway. And the first thing we're going to do is cut off the stem, and I'm just going to use my box cutter knife. I do think in the past that these were a separate piece that was attached to the pumpkin with like a toothpick, but now they are actually molded into the pumpkin. So just remove that, and then we're going to cover the entire pumpkin in Mod Podge because that will make it easier to paint. So I'm just using some of the matte Mod Podge, and I'm going to cover the pumpkin, and so that I can do it all at once, I'm going to stick a bamboo skewer in where I cut that stem off, and that allows me to hold it by the skewer and cover the entire thing with Mod Podge, and then I can stick that skewer in a box while it dries. Now I'm going to make a box, and so I'm going to cut a piece of corrugated cardboard that is 12 inches long by 6 inches high. And this is just the flap off of a cardboard box. And what we're going to do is we're going to have 3-inch sides. So after we cut our 12 by 6 inch piece, every 3 inches I'm going to score the piece of cardboard to make it easy to fold into a box. Now I'm going to cover that with half of this self-adhesive wall tile that I bought at the Dollar Tree. And this is some sort of plastic, but it looks like those old-fashioned tin tiles that I think were around in the Victorian era. And we're going to use half of this. The tile is peel and stick, so I'm going to leave that plastic backing on and cut it in half. I'm then going to take the plastic backing off of one half of it and adhere it to my piece of cardboard. Now, I don't feel that this stuck particularly well, and I ended up supplementing this with some hot glue. So I would recommend using a stronger glue than either hot glue or the adhesive, maybe E6000 between this tile and the piece of cardboard. Put some weight on it, let it dry, or put it on, form it into the square, the sort of square tube that we're going to make, and maybe wrap some rubber bands around it to hold it in place, because of course when we bend it, that's going to pull on the tile a little bit, but I definitely would supplement the adhesive that's on the tile. One thing I did was cut off a little strip of the cardboard so that there wouldn't be a cardboard edge showing, so that the tile meets tile where the two pieces of cardboard join. I then hot glued that cardboard edge together, and I added some duct tape to hold the inside of that together. Nobody's going to see the inside, and the duct tape is nice and strong. I decided that I wanted a little bit of reinforcement on the inside to hold it in that shape so it doesn't bend. So I cut some more 6-inch pieces of cardboard. I measured that diagonal, and I cut 2 pieces of cardboard to that width, and I cut one of them in half. And then I pushed the piece down into the diagonal, and then the 2 pieces on either side. And it held pretty well. Just if you cut it the right length, then it will stick in there pretty well. But I did also add just a little bit of hot glue on that to hold it in place. Now what I'm going to use on top of this to hold our pumpkin topiary is this mirror that I got at the Dollar Tree. And this is just plastic, the frame around the mirror. But what I want to do is try to match that finish. So I'm going to use a couple of metallic paints and some black paint. The metallic paints I'm going to use are these Deco Art metallics. And I'm going to start putting down a base coat of rich espresso. This is a gorgeous color. It gives us a sort of a brass finish. It doesn't exactly match the mirror though, so it's not the final color that I'm going to use. So I just brushed that on the entire piece, and I did my best to cover the piece, but there were a few spaces that I missed. It was hard with the first coat. That's okay, because we're going to go in with a second coat. Now the second coat is the same Deco Art Dazzling Metallics, but the color is champagne gold. And this is much closer to the metallic color in the mirror. but it's almost a translucent paint. So I feel like we really needed that base coat of rich espresso to give the piece depth, and so that original sort of plasticky silver color didn't show through. So just go over the whole thing then with the champagne gold. And then once all of that has dried, I dry brushed on some black, and this is just apple barrel acrylic black paint. Now with the black, I found that the best way to dry brush this on was to go with the decoration that's on the tile piece. So not like, say, dry brush straight across, just down the piece or at a diagonal, but to go with the curves, with the little leaves, with the details. That, in my opinion, looked best. So I did just dry brush over that. And of course, if you dry brush over and then you find there are places where you feel you went a little too heavy, you can always go back in with either of the metallic paints and touch that up. But once that was done, I felt I had a pretty good match for the paint on the mirror. Now originally I was going to paint all of my pumpkins/gourds in black, but I loved the color of that red one so much I decided to leave that color and just paint the top one and the bottom one. And this is black acrylic paint, which I have mixed with a little bit of baking soda, and that's to give it just a little bit of texture. And it also gives you very good coverage, almost like chalk paint when you mix with baking soda. So I used that to paint the bottom one, the carvable pumpkin, and then the top one. And there was just a little blemish, a little spot that was unfinished on the red one, so I tried to mix up some paint to sort of match that with some red and some black and some metallic paint just to match that, to hide that blemish. Now for the two pumpkins that are painted black, I'm going to put some flecks on them. So I wanted to mix up some paint that was sort of a maroon color like the leaves and the other gourd that I'm going to use. So I mixed some red acrylic paint, black, and also one of my metallic paints to try to get a color that I could fleck onto the pumpkins. And I mixed some water in that to make it wetter and easy to fleck. I then put the pumpkin and gourd in a box because this is a messy process, and I used a toothbrush because it's nice and stiff, so I think any stiff brush will work, and a craft stick. And I got the wet paint on the brush and then brushed it along the craft stick to make flecks. Now, the wetter the paint, maybe the easier it is to make the flecks, but then you run the risk of it dripping down the pumpkin. So you want to find that sweet spot where it flecks easily onto the pumpkin but doesn't run down and make drips. Now I did the red color, and then I decided I wanted a little bit of metallic as well. So I used the rich espresso metallic paint and did a little bit of flecks in that color as well. Now, in places where it was too wet and it ran a little bit, or it just looked too heavy to me, I just went back and touched it up with the black paint. And once I was happy with the paint on the pumpkin and the gourd, I gave them a coat of matte Mod Podge. Even though it's the matte Mod Podge, it is going to give them a little bit of shine. They won't be quite so matte as with the baking soda paint. And I needed them to be a little bit shiny because that reddish, maroonish gourd is shiny, so I wanted them to match in their finish. Now I'm going to use these beautiful maroon maple leaves from the Dollar Tree. And when I use this faux foliage, I usually do iron it. So I am ironing it on a very low setting. It is down near silk on my iron, and about 10 seconds per leaf. I took the leaves apart with a wire cutter, and then up near the top, they're just plastic, so you could cut them with regular scissors. And I did cut them all off so I had individual leaves. I usually iron them because they don't look very natural when they get crumpled up, in the box or however they're shipped. Even though leaves, when they're on the tree, they usually are pretty flat. When they fall on the ground and start to dry, they crumple up, but they don't look like crumpled the way these leaves look. So I do like to iron them. It makes them look a lot nicer. And now I'm just using hot glue to glue the mirror to the base that we created, and then I'm just going to arrange the leaves on top of that and then put the pumpkin topiary on top of that. So I took that stem that we reserved from the maroon gourd and I put that in the small gourd, which is going to be on top, and that fit just fine, and then glued that to the gourd that's going to be in the middle, the medium-sized gourd, and then glued that to our pumpkin. And now with the leaves, I did use most of the leaves, and I did cut them so that they were individual. So I started with a layer of the largest leaves, and then I added 2 layers of small leaves on top of that because that fullness seemed necessary to me for this to look right. And then I glued the bottom pumpkin to the mirror. Now, I did not bother to remove the mirror because I really didn't want to have a piece of glass lying around that I wasn't going to use. So you certainly could remove the mirror if you wanted to use it for something else. Now with that all done, I felt like it just needed something a little bit more up at the top. And I took some necklaces that I have that are gold chains and sort of wrapped them around, and I thought that looked really good. So if you have gold beads or an old gold chain, I'm not saying it's real gold and some kind of gold plate, costume jewelry necklace, but if you have something like that, that might look a little better than the ribbon that I'm using here, just because most of this is faux metal, right? It looks like it's supposed to be metal. So I tried a few different gold ribbons that I happen to have, and I ended up using this very thin one, which is quite stiff. It's sort of wired, and I just cut those pieces to size for between the pumpkins and just glued them with hot glue. I just tried to be careful to keep them standing up and not recessed too much in that crevice between the pumpkins, because I wanted it to be, first of all, neat, and second, quite visible. And if you're seeing a little white on the pumpkin, that's just because the Mod Podge isn't completely dry yet, but it is mostly dry, and I made sure it was dry where I was gluing things together. It's just a little bit wet there on the crevice in that big pumpkin. And here's what it looks like.
So what did you think of our dramatic topiary? I had a lot of fun making it, and I'm curious to know if you would have made different design decisions along the way. Tell me in the comments if so. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. That tells me that you like this sort of content and I should bring you more. And if you like this sort of content, please subscribe to Crafts the Charm. Thank you for spending time with me today. Take care.